Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Ramo Rajamani Sada Vijayate Ramam Ramesham Bhaje Ramena Bihata Nishacharachamu Ramaya Tasmai Namaha. रामान्नास्ति परायणं परतरं रामस्य दासोऽस्म्यहम् रामे चित्तलयः सदा भवतु मे भो राम मामुद्धर समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम् सत्प्रत्यया किं नु विहाय सन्तं हृद्येश चिन्तारहितो हृदाख्यः कथं स्मरामस्तममेयमेकं तस्य स्मृतिस्तत्र दृढैव निष्ठा. One of the uniqueness of Saddarshanam is Bhagavan Raman Maharshi Ji is holding on to one single idea. And every verse is an elaboration on that particular idea. How I am not Ahamkara and how I am Sat. Generally, what you see in other texts is when you go from verse 1 to 2 to 3, there is a sequential flow of thought. There is a progress which happens as far as thought development is concerned. First part will be Sadhana Chatushtaya, then it will be Anubandha Chatushtaya, then the background, then they will sequentially go ahead. Beauty of Saddarshanam is every verse is independent. Out of 40 verses, 40 plus verses, every verse is giving us an entry into the same truth. Just like if there is one room and 40 doors, you enter through any door, you will reach here. Like that, there is Sat and 40 plus verses of Saddarshanam pointing out to that same Sat. Bhagavan says in one place, why are we even seeking this? Why are we seeking Sat? He says, Ahamkara is not our Swarupa. This ego is not our essential nature. We will have this understanding only when we know of a state where I was free from ego. The example he gives is, if somebody gets a headache, why do we strive to get rid of that headache? He says, because I know of a state without headache also. If headache has come, it has come for some reason. And I know that it is not my nature. That is why I try to get rid of it. He says, in the same way, this sadhaka knows that this ego or finitude or ahamkara is not my absolute nature. I have seen a state where I exist without ego. But the beauty is when that state is deep sleep, Don't get tired of deep sleep. Huh? Saddarshanam, same example Bhagavan will bring. So he says, in waking state, that sadhaka is trying to seek this sat. Because he knows Ahamkara is not my absolute nature. I've had a glimpse of that state, devoid of Ahamkara. Even when we hear some Mahatmas who talk about certain transformative experiences, you cannot dive too much into that topic, huh? Because somebody's experience neither can you validate nor can you refute. But one way to understand that is whenever we are reminded of ourselves devoid of ego, that is a very powerful transformative experience. Again, to use the word experience, it is just to indicate that this quest has to be wholehearted. To seek that state devoid of ego, it is very much possible, it is very much there. On the strength of knowledge, seeking this is called as Atma Vichara. So Bhagavan is, every door has a specific design. Just like one room, different doors can have different designs, different themes. Like that, every verse has a different theme. Verse number 11 and 12, Bhagavan introduced us to one way of inquiry. And that way is, so don't be afraid of pairs of opposites. Joy and sorrow, don't try to hold on to either. Anger, calmness, as far as vichara is concerned, don't try to hold on to either. Instead, inquire, for whom are these pairs of opposites? Dvandvani sarvani akhilaha triputyaha. All pairs of opposites and triad. Kinchit samashrita vibhanti vastu. Taking support of something, they are known. Without that thing, all the pairs of opposites and triads, they will not even appear. What is that thing? That thing is Ahamkara. And now inquire, what is the substratum of this Ahamkara? Tan margane syat galitam samastam. Having inquired into the substratum of Ahamkara, all the pairs of opposites as though become irrelevant. But that conviction has to be strong that this Ahamkara is also an appearance in Sat. Pairs of opposites are rooted in Ahamkara. Ahamkara is rooted in Sat. That Sat I am. So he said, take any pair of opposites, don't get caught in solving that pair of opposite. They come because of karma. There is no permanent solution at karma level. Stop-gap arrangement. If I say I want Sukham, I can do Satkarma to bring Sukham. But that Satkarma, what is the greatest limitation of it? It is time-bound. When that Satkarma result I have got, to get more Sukham, more Satkarma. This is just an example. This is not to say we should not do Satkarma. But this is to appreciate what is the difference between solution through karma and solution to jnana. Through knowledge, the result is abidance in Sat, where there is no impermanence. The object that we have gained, that is permanent. That is why result is also permanent. When it comes to karma, the nature of karma is such that it is impermanent. So whatever I accomplish through karma, result will also be impermanent. So he says this pair of opposites, at Vyavaharika level, little bit we can try to address. But spending our whole life trying to solve them at that level, he says it will not take us anywhere. So a more permanent solution is enquire the one who is going through pairs of opposites, and enquire what is the nature of this Ahamkara. If somebody has faith in Shastra and Guru Vakya, to hold on to this understanding, it becomes very easy, and also that faith is very helpful. If you look at the conversations between Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Ji, just this one statement that there is nothing but God, this was sufficient for him to negate Ahamkara, to negate thoughts, to negate Jagat. Just on the strength of one statement. That is the power of Shraddha also. On the strength of Upanishadic teaching, inquiring into this particular topic. Now Bhagavan says, I gave an example of pairs of opposites. Dvandvan, one pair of opposite was Vidya and Avidya. He says Vidya is known only when there is Avidya. And Avidya is meaningful only if there is something called as Vidya. So pairs which are mutually dependent, none of them is absolute. Dvayam cha kasya iti vicharya mula. Inquire what is the substratum of all these pairs of opposites. First you will come to Ahamkara and inquire into substratum of Ahamkara. Now Bhagavan points out example of a triad. Pair of opposite was verse number 12. In 13th verse, he is taking example of a triad. Bodharamatmanamajanato yah. Bodharamatmanamajanato yah. Bodhasya kim syat paramartha bodha. Bodhasya kim syat paramartha bodha. Bodhasya bodhyasya cha samshrayam swam. Bodhasya bodhyasya cha samshrayam swam. Vijanatastadvitayam vinashyet. Vijanatastadvitayam vinashyet. Bodharamatmanamajanato yah. Bodhasya kim syat paramartha bodha. Bodhasya bodhyasya cha samshrayam swam. Vijanatastadvitayam vinashyet. This example is of a triad. Whenever you say, I know, if you make that statement, I know, what is the natural thing? What is the counter question that will be asked? What do you know? So I know and the object that I know. If I say I know and I know that object, the third question which will come is, how do you know? Who is knowing it? What is known? And how is it known? The one who is knowing it is called as bodha. The one who is knowing it is bodha. Thing which is known is bodhya. Bodhya. And the means by which it is known is bodha. Bodha. So he says, these three things which are there, if I know lot of things outside, and I use different means to know things, I use variety of bodha, I use variety, through that bodha I know variety of bodhya. Simple example for bodha, bodhya and bodha is, if let us say I'm seeing this camera, who is the bodha? Me, myself. What is the bodhya? Camera. Bodhya means object. And what is bodha? Bodha is the thought which is helping me see this camera. Until this thought was there, I did not notice this camera. I was seeing all of you, seeing here. I might have even looked at it. But until this thought comes, this is a camera, bodha doesn't become known to me. So I might have variety of thoughts. Through those thoughts, I might know variety of objects. But here Bhagavan says, without inquiring into who is the knower, knowledge of variety of bodhya, can it be called as real knowledge? Without inquiring into what is the nature of knower, even if I know a lot of things which are known, he says it cannot be called as absolute knowledge. How many things I know versus who is the one knowing it? How many things I have done versus who is the one doing it? Without knowing the nature of doer and knower, knowing several things in this world, Bhagavan says that is not Paramartha bodha, that is not absolute knowledge. Bhagavan Raman Maharshi Ji gives a beautiful example for this shloka. He says, knowing too many things in the world is like a child trying to step on the head of his shadow. When you are standing and there is a shadow, and this child is trying to step on the head of the shadow. Moment he steps there, the head moves away. Moment it jumps to another place, again it moves away. So he says, what does a compassionate mother do? She will bring the child, look at him suffering like this, and say, if you want to hold on to your head, don't try to step on the shadow and hold on. Just take your hand and keep it here. If you have kept it here, you have held on to the head of the shadow also. In Puranas, this is the story of Bhasmasura. Bhasmasura, what did he do? He got a boon from Lord Shiva that whatever he touches will burn into ashes. And his project was to go and touch different people, including Lord Shiva. Then comes Bhagavan Vishnu. What does he do? Becomes a dance teacher. He said, I will teach you some dance mudras, I will teach you. And one of the mudra was keeping it on his own head. And through that, Bhasmasura burns down. Means it is a symbolic meaning of this verse. Not knowing oneself, no matter what we know outside, there is no end to that knowledge. The main thing is, have we known the knower or not? When that Ahamkara burns down, when that ego is falsified, that is when true contentment rises. Now, if you want a technical word for this, or let us see the verse first, then we'll come to the technical word. All of you are comfortable now with marking the words, right? Actually, in the Guruji's commentary, the words are given with Anvaya. Anvaya means rearranging the words. They are already done for us. But slightly, I might go here and there. So don't get confused. Either hold on to that. I'll try to match most of it, but some places, if it is slightly different, don't get confused. 13th verse, the verse opens up as bodharam atmanam ajanatah. Not knowing the nature of bodha, of one's own self. Atmanam here means one's own self. Bodharam atmanam ajanatah. Yah bodha sah paramartha bodha kim syat. Yah bodha sah paramartha bodha kim syat. Without knowing the nature of the knower, that knowledge which is knowledge of the world, is that, or can that knowledge be considered as absolute knowledge? Paramartha bodha, yah bodha sah paramartha bodha kim syat. Bodhasya bodhyasya cha samshrayam swam. the substratum of bodha means the knowledge which is happening of the world outside, and bodhya. Bodhya means the object of which knowledge is happening. The substratum of both of them, first is who? Ahamkara. Only when Ahamkara is there, bodha is there, bodhya is there. But the substratum of Ahamkara is Sat. Knowing that Sat, Vijanatah or Tad Dvitayam Vinashet. Tad Dvitayam Vinashet. Vijanatah will go with previous sentence. Bodhasya bodhyasya cha samshrayam swam vijanatah dvitayam tad dvitayam vinashet. If you make or if you interpret that word swam as only ahankara, then what will be the meaning of this verse? The pair of opposites which are there, or the knowing and known which is there, bodha and bodhya which is there, the source of that is ahankara. But having known ahankara, bodha and bodhya both get destroyed or both disappear. You see, knowing ahankara will not disappear, ahankara, this knowledge and known. Knowing atma is the substratum of ahankara will make both of these two things get negated. What is the word dvitayam here? It is that both will get or both will disappear. Vinashet means it will disappear. What two things will disappear? Bodha and bodhya. Bodha and bodhya. He says, don't worry about bodha and bodhya. Just worry about ahankara. If I know the nature of ahankara, then this act of knowing and the known, both of them will disappear. Dvitayam means that. Means the main idea here is, if our fundamental identity is mistaken, through that mistaken identity, the knowledge that comes cannot be true knowledge. Identity itself is mistaken, means taking ourselves to be this ahankara. Through this ahankara, I am knowing so many things of this world outside. That knowledge will not be absolute knowledge. In Upanishadic language, these two things are called as Para Vidhya and Apara Vidhya. Para Vidhya is knowledge of the self. This knowledge that I am not ahankara. And Apara Vidhya is all the knowledge which is gained as ahankara. Sacred knowledge and secular knowledge. Spiritual knowledge and secular knowledge. Spiritual knowledge is Para Vidhya. Means that knowledge which takes us to Akshara. Yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate sa Para Vidhya. Mundakopanishad. That knowledge which takes us to our own true nature, that knowledge is Para Vidhya. And what is Apara Vidhya? Keeping that ahankara intact, keeping that finitude intact, whatever knowledge we gather, that is Apara Vidhya. I remember one speaker, he made a very interesting point. He said, whether you want Para Vidhya or you want Apara Vidhya, he was a professor in a university. He said, whether you want Para Vidhya or Apara Vidhya, you have to devote your life to either of this pursuit. Means even if you want Apara Vidhya, it will not come casually. Whole life you have to devote to get Apara Vidhya. But the result of seeking Apara Vidhya in the right spirit is such, desire for Para Vidhya will come. And then the pursuit of life will shift towards seeking only Para Vidhya. At whatever point it comes, He said, make sure that your pursuit is wholehearted. Either seek Apara Vidhya wholeheartedly, in the way that Shastras have told us to seek. And they guarantee that it will lead us to Para Vidhya. And if you have started seeking Para Vidhya, don't go back to Apara Vidhya again. So that is the difference. One is called as Paramartha bodha, knowledge of the self. Other one, if you want to call it as, if you want to give it a name, we can call it as Vyavaharika bodha, transactional knowledge. Paramartha bodha is absolute knowledge or knowledge of the absolute. And Vyavaharik knowledge is, Vyavaharik bodha is knowledge of transactional. Now, just for clarity purpose, what is the difference between these two bodha? In Paramartha bodha, the knowledge is about Aham, bodha. In Vyavaharika bodha, knowledge is about Idam. Knowledge is about nature of the world. The true meaning of Aham never changes, whereas Idam keeps changing. That's why any knowledge we gain about the world outside, at some point, it becomes outdated. Means if we are seeking contentment through knowledge, this is one of the defects which comes through it. Even research, right? Whatever is done 25 years later, so many things get questioned, so many things change. So if that work becomes the definition of my contentment, so I should be ready for different experiences in and through that knowledge of Idam. Second one is Paramartha bodha removes finitude. Paramartha bodha removes finitude, whereas Vyavaharika bodha, keeping finitude, it will give more information. This is actually the introduction in 7th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. When Naradji goes to Sanat Kumaras, he has a long list of what all things he has learned. He has learned geography, he has learned mathematics, he has learned even the art of removing poison if there is a snake bite. Sarpa Vidhya he has learned. But then he says, in spite of doing this, my shoka has not gone away. The agitations of my mind and the sorrow of my mind, sorrow in my mind has not gone away. Please teach me something by which my sorrow goes away. And that is how the teaching of 7th chapter begins, Chandogya. The main teaching there is, unless his finitude is negated, no matter what knowledge we get, that knowledge will not remove discontentment. Bhuma Vidya it is. Bhumaiva sukham na alpe sukhamaste. In infinitude alone there is joy. As this person, no matter what accomplishment it is, it's only a matter of time, we'll be back to square one. This is another difference. The main difference, now this is the main point. In Paramartha bodha, one alone is understood to be all. In Paramartha bodha, that Chaitanya alone is understood to be everything. What is there in Vyavaharik bodha? Whatever we know is understood as different from ourselves. Whatever we know is understood as different from Aham. For example, in dream, we know several objects. We might define several objects. But because everything is known as different from the dreamer, I see myself in the dream and I see different objects that I'm seeing through that dreamer. None of that bodha is Paramartha bodha, relatively speaking. Only when I understand dreamer and dream world was a projection of waking mind, then alone the knowledge can be considered as true knowledge of dream world. In the same way, whatever Vyavaharik bodha is happening, that Vyavaharik bodha, what is it telling us? Whatever objects are there, they are different, you are different. Whereas Paramartha bodha is telling there is only one Chaitanya in which this knower is appearing, knowledge is appearing, and known is appearing. That is why Bhagavan says knowledge of world without knowing Atma. That knowledge is incomplete knowledge. When we sing any song, first thing what we make sure is Shruti should be right. The first note should be on the right note. If that note is off, whatever you sing after that, everything will be off. So off note is thinking ourselves to be Ahamkara. And with that, whatever is done, Bhagavan says all of that is erroneous. Now, Bhagavan, you kept saying what is erroneous knowledge. Can you please tell us what is true knowledge also? He says, yes. Next verse is what is true knowledge. Nidra na vidya, grahanam na vidya, grunhati kinchinna yathartha bodhe. Nidra padartha grahane tarasyat. Chideva vidya vilasantya shunya. Nidra na vidya grahanam na vidya grunhati kinchinna yathartha bodhe. Nidra padartha grahane tarasyat. Chideva vidya vilasantya shunya. Now there is a student who says, Bhagavan, you told this triputi, triad, that is not the absolute state. You should inquire into the knower. Whenever that triad disappears, that is knowledge. He said, I know of a state where triad disappears. Can I call that state as knowledge? Bhagavan says, Nidrana Vidya. Deep sleep, where the triad dissolves, that is not knowledge. Means forcefully trying to unsee this Ahamkara, trying to shut down perception of Ahamkara. He says that is not knowledge. It happens naturally in deep sleep, but that is not a state of realization. That would have been easy, right? All would have been realized without any sadhana. Grahanam na vidya. Gaining lot of knowledge, knowing too many things in waking and dream. That is also not vidya. That is also not true knowledge. Then what is true knowledge? Yathartha bodhe kinchin na grunhati. True knowledge is that when you don't perceive anything as different from yourself. See, Saddarshanam Bhagavan expects we are adding certain words. He will not add all the words. Yathartha, second line you see, what does it say? Grunhati kinchinna yathartha bodhe. So how will you rearrange it? Yathartha bodhe kinchit na grunhati. Kinchit na grunhati happens in deep sleep also. So how is it called as yathartha bodha? You have to add one word there. Kinchit atma swarupat anyatvena na grunhati. You are not seeing anything as different from yourself. Whenever that happens, that is called as yathartha bodha. Closing our eyes is not yathartha bodha. Knowing too many things in the world outside is not Yathartha Bodha. What is Yathartha Bodha? When I know everything as not different from myself, that is Yathartha Bodha. Which mantra is this? From Ishavasya. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevānupashyati sarvabhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate. This is the Phalashruti of entire Upanishadic study. Yah tu sarvani bhutani atmani eva anupashyati. He sees this entire creation, all the bhutas in Atma. And sarva bhuteshu cha atmanam. He sees himself in all beings. What is the result he got? The result he got was he can happily live in this world. Tatah na vijugupsate. Whatever he was supposed to do, if somebody else does, he says no vijugupsa. It is the same Chaitanya which was supposed to do through this upadhi, it is doing through that upadhi. Whatever mana he was supposed to get, if some other upadhi gets, some other person gets, the Phalashruti of Vedantic study is no vijugupsa. On one hand, he understands he is not this upadhi. On the other hand, he understands I am that Sat in which all upadhis are appearing. Tatah na vijugupsate. Then yasmin sarvani bhutani atmaiva bhut vijanata. Second verse also, the same thing. If we don't have this understanding, what is the sweet result we will get? Moha and shoka. Upanishad mantra says, if you have this understanding, you will not have moha, you will not have shoka. Another way to look at it is, if I don't understand the truth in this way, if I take the world as different, myself as different, people as different, the sumadura phala of this understanding is shoka and moha. Delusion and lot of conflicts in life. Yathartha bodhe kinchit na grunhati. What is the word you have to add? Atma swarupat anyatvena. All these words are important. Otherwise, when we see this verse again, the first line and second line will look the same. First line, Bhagavan said, Nidrana Vidya. And second line, he is saying, Yathartha bodhe kinchit na grunhati. Kinchit na grunhati means he doesn't see anything as different from himself. Nidra, you can put one line there. And padartha grahana itara. Nidra, padartha grahana itara. Chid eva vidya syat. What is true knowledge? He says true knowledge is different from nidra, different from deep sleep, and different from erroneous perception. Padartha grahana itara. Padartha grahana means erroneously taking this world to be true, different from oneself. Whatever is different from both of this, that is Paramartha Vidya. Chideva Vidya vilasanti ashunya. The realized master, realized saint, he is not having just some intellectual understanding of this knowledge. He says Chideva Vidya vilasanti. In that knowledge, he is also reveling. And because you have negated everything, it is not void, it's a very positive entity. Ashunya. Both words are important. Vilasanti also and Ashunya also. One Mahatma Ji would say, ईश्वर विद्यमान सब में है, पर वर्तमान थोड़े लोगों में है. Vidyaman means God is in everybody's heart. He is there in, that's a matter of fact. But that divinity to manifest and express and to revel, he says that happens through some effort. Raman Maharshi Ji, he gives one example for this point. Bhagavan was sitting in his sabha, and somebody comes and reads a poetry. And he says, in the non-action of this saint, he has won everybody. In the non-action of this saint, he has won everybody. But Bhagavan clarifies and he says, this is not some inert inaction. Non-action is not something inert and actionlessness. And then he gives example of gyroscope. When that gyroscope is rotating at a high speed, it looks still. But you see, from top to down, everything is moving. Like that, he says, this ananda of a Brahmajnani, it's a pulsating joy. It's a positive reveling. It is not something like deep sleep. In deep sleep, bliss is there, but there is no reveling which happens. Whereas if Ahamkara is negated, thoughts are negated, and world is understood to be an appearance, this is a joy which is there, that is positive reveling. Chideva Vidya Vilasanti Ashunya. In Bhagavad Gita, the echo of this verse is in second chapter. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti sanyami. Yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato munehe. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam. That which is night to everybody, in that this sanyami is awake. How do you understand it? That sat towards which whole world is asleep. This sanyami is awake to that sat. Vilasanti ashunya. Yasyam jagrati bhutani. That ahankara to satisfy whom whole world is running around. Yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato mune. The awakened master looks at that ahankara as mithya. Sa nisha means he has negated that ahankara, and that which is so important for whole world, that is unimportant for him. And that thing which is unimportant for the whole world is the most important thing for him. So, how important is Sat for whole world? Whatever importance it is, for this particular sadhaka you say, he says that is my main pursuit, abidance in that Sat. And how important is Ahamkara for Jagat? It is the most important thing. For this sadhaka, Ahamkara is not his goal at all. In his priority list, satisfying Ahamkara, strengthening Ahamkara doesn't show up. Chideva Vidya Vilasanti Ashunya. Now Bhagavan says it is not only important to understand you are different from thoughts, we should also appreciate this same Sat is appearing as thoughts and this whole creation. One alone has become many. This point we have to keep hammering. He explains this with an example now. 15th verse you see. Satyaschidatma vividha krutischite siddhet pruthak satyachito na bhinna bhusha vikara kimusanti satyam. विना सुवर्णं पृथगत्र लोके सत्यश्चिदात्मा विविधाकृतिश्चित् सिद्धेत् पृथक् सत्यचितो न भिन्ना भूषा विकाराः किमु सन्ति सत्यं विना सुवर्णं पृथगत्र लोके चिदात्मा सत्य चिदात्मा सत्यः this consciousness or sat which is of the nature of chit, it is one's own self, that alone is the reality. Vivida akrutihi chit, that one reality alone has become different name and form. Different thoughts, different objects of the world. It is that same truth which is appearing as many. Chidatma satyah. Vivida akrutihi chit. Next line you'll have to rearrange a little bit. Huh? Satya chitoho सत्य चितः भिन्ना पृथक न सिद्ध्येत सत्य चितः भिन्ना पृथक न सिद्ध्येत all of these names and forms which are there different thoughts which are there satya chitah this consciousness bhinna means different from this consciousness you cannot establish it and pruthak means separate from this consciousness you cannot establish all these thoughts names and forms in this entire creation as different from this consciousness and separate from this consciousness that one alone is appearing as thoughts as ahamkara as this whole world. You know, one part of our journey is to say I am not thoughts, I am not this world. But if I just separate myself from thoughts and world, I have accomplished 50% Vedanta. Next 50% Vedanta is to understand there is nothing other than this consciousness. Which means what? Thought and world is nothing but consciousness. That one alone is appearing as many. Bhagavan says, let me explain with an example. Atra loke. Look at the last two words of that line. Atra loke. In this world, just like Satyam Suvarnam Vina, other than this gold, Pruthag Bhusha Vikaraha Kimu Santi. I'll repeat this again. Huh? Satyam Suvarnam Vina Pruthak Bhusha Vikaraha Kimu Santi. If there is a variety of different ornaments, there is a necklace, there is a bracelet, anklet, bangle. Other than gold, he says, tell me what is here. You touch any part of that necklace, can you see any separate entity called as necklace, or is it only gold? There is only gold. There is nothing called as necklace. There is nothing called as bangle. But I do see difference between the gold bar that I saw and this particular bangle that I'm seeing. You see, this bangle that you are seeing is only a word. It is only a word. There is no substance called as a bangle. Substance is gold. In the same way, different thoughts that are seen. And this world of names and forms which is seen, the substance which is there is only Sat. But what is the main point here? Why is Bhagavan bringing gold analogy? First is to show one alone has become many. Gold alone has become ornaments. Like that, Sat alone has become different names and forms. But who is a wise person as far as gold is concerned? While seeing ornaments, he is able to see or recognize gold. If he says, every time I have to melt down the bangle to recognize gold, that means he has not understood the cause-effect relationship. So if a person says, whenever I see the world and I see different names and forms, Sat as though disappears. Means my insistence is only when I make everything homogeneous. That is the only time I will see Sat. He says, no. While seeing the effect, I should be able to see the cause. In Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan calls this as Vijnanam. One is called as Jnanam, another is called as Vijnanam. One alone has become many, Jnanam. While seeing the manyness, if I can recognize the one, that is Vijnanam. One becoming many is Jnanam. But in the midst of manyness, in the midst of transactions, paying attention to that one, that is called as Vijnanam. Do you see there are two words that are used there? In the second line, Satyachitaha Bhinna Pruthak Na Siddhyet. There is a reason why both words have come. When you say Na Bhinna, means other than consciousness, you cannot establish anything here. What it means is there is Karya Karana Bhava, cause-effect relationship between consciousness and world. So it is one thing to say two things are appearing together. But it is another to say one depends on the other. Ram and Shyam can always be seen together. But it doesn't mean existence of Ram depends on Shyam. Like that, world and consciousness we might have seen together. But that by itself doesn't guarantee that world depends upon consciousness. So over here it is said, na bhinna, means karya karana bhava is established first. Cause-effect relationship is first established. Then na pruthak. Na pruthak means you cannot see both of them separately. If they were two independent things, you could see Ram somewhere, Shyam somewhere. They might have appeared together for some, or don't take Ram Shyam example. Let us say this book and harmonium. Right? Book and harmonium, they are two things. So you can see book somewhere, you can see harmonium somewhere. But if you say thread and cloth, you cannot see cloth somewhere and thread somewhere. Like that, he says world and consciousness, they are like this, thread and cloth, unlike book and harmonium. We have never seen world somewhere, never seen consciousness somewhere. And if they were two independent things, they would always be available to us. What is the nature of, what is the definition of truth? That which is always there. That which never gets negated, that is the truth. So if Jagat was absolute, in deep sleep also Jagat would continue. The very fact that something goes away, he says that is not absolute. Name and form keeps changing. Gold remains the same. In the same way, name and form of Jagat will keep changing. Chaitanya remains the same. Raman Maharshi Ji, in one place, one villager comes to him with lot of problems. And Bhagwan tells him, ask who is having problems. who is the one who is having problem, gives this teaching and he goes away. Then people who are around Bhagwan, they ask him, Bhagwan, this was a villager. He probably did not know too many things, and you said, inquire into who has problems, all problems will be solved. Do you think his problem will be solved? Bhagwan's answer was very beautiful. He said, what can I do? This is all I know. This is called their nishtha. Their abidance in this truth comes because they are living it. It is if something is working, hold on to it. Whatever is our main method of inquiry. If this inquiry appeals to us, we say hold on to it. That alone will bring all the results. Vina suvarnam prutagatra loke. All different points we saw. Next Saturday, we will not have Saddarshanam class. Swami Ramakrishnananji will be here for discourses at our ashram, and next Saturday will be in San Mateo. So hope to see all of you there, also for the yajna and at the talks. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.